What's it like to learn math on Brilliant.org? Brilliant gets you hands-on to help you learn by doing.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics, and today we're going to talk about parties. Woo! Yeah! No, not those kind of parties. We're talking about political parties, which can be a lot less fun. Woo. So today we're talking about why we have political parties and the role of parties in American politics. But before we dive into the pool, some would say a cesspool, that is political parties, let's have a definition. Political party, a team of politicians, activists, and voters whose goal is to win control of government. So kind of an important point.
Well, hello everyone. Okay, so today is our short course, and we have to remember to allow time for the debate, and let's proceed here. Reading that we began covering, well, most of it we covered at the last class. Let's go on and talk about political primaries that we are the topic of chapter 2 in the reading, and the political primaries. And so how can we describe what's going on in political primaries? Well, here's something else that just came up in the news media that that you might find interesting. Let me again make sure I'm opening up the right files here, and that you're able to you're actually able to see what I'm trying to share. Here is something that appeared in today's New York Times. Well, that's not the right one. Sorry, wrong one. Wrong. Nebraska. I think I have it here. Yeah, here it is. Sorry, this is the Nebraska report that came up today, highlighting how Nebraska has become a far right-wing dominated party. The Republican Party has become, again, dominated by Trump supporters, and that in the primary coming up in Nebraska, a state of only 500,000 people, that the leader in the primary to be nominated as the Republican candidate for governor of Nebraska is a man, Charles Herbster, who appears to be charged with having sexually groped and harassed various women at various events. And he apparently is likely to win. He's a rich man. He's a cattle baron, and who's made a lot of money in the beef industry. And yet he has been charged by a number of women with sexual assault. Yet he is likely to win because Donald Trump has endorsed him. Donald Trump has endorsed this person to be his favorite candidate that Republicans should support in the upcoming Republican primary for governor. And again, the election, general election for governor, will be in November of this year. And this editorial, which is written by a Republican political activist, partisan activist in the Republican Party in the Republican Party in Nebraska, notes how the Republican Party has become radicalized or fractured, and some elements of radicalized as a consequence of the domination by Donald Trump. And despite the fact that Nebraska has a long history of being pretty moderate in terms of its pro-business, typical Republican orientation of being pro-business, moderates, able to cooperate closely with Democrats if necessary to get legislation passed through the Congress and signed by the president. And they note a number of these so-called Chamber of Commerce Republicans, typical pro-business, socially moderate, pro-business, pro-military white guys, making them all indistinguishable from old-line Chamber of Commerce Republicans from the coasts. And they just mentioned some of these famous ones, senators that were Republicans but were really willing to cooperate closely, if necessary, with Democratic presidents. And mentioning here, Senator Bob Kerrey voted for the North American Free Trade Agreement that Donald Trump attacked, and so on. These, of course, this person, it came to mind because, as I told you, before coming to the Catholic University of Korea, I taught at the American University in Bulgaria. And the American University in Bulgaria was set up with U.S. government support, U.S. government funding. And the United States government has been setting up these universities around the world in different countries. I think the first one was in Africa in the late 1980s, but there's an American university in Nigeria in the 1990s. There's an American university in Central Asia, and there's an American university in Cambodia, and there's also an American university in Vietnam called Fulbright University. And of course, Senator Fulbright is the name of the person given to the scholarship program in which professors from the United States could go teach and work at foreign universities. We had a number of Fulbright professors taught at the American University in Bulgaria, and also it encouraged international professors to come to the United States to live and teach for a year or two at American universities. So they set up this Fulbright University in Vietnam, and it started work only, I think, not even 10 years ago. It's a young university. Well, no, 5 years ago. It's now 8 years ago. Yeah, 2016, so that'd be 6 years ago. It started work at the Fulbright University. And of course, you know, the United States fought a vicious war in Vietnam and lost. And Vietnam was unified under the communist regime in Hanoi. And of course, now that Vietnam and the United States share a common adversary in the form of China, that has motivated Vietnam and the United States to look beyond the past and cooperate more closely economically and culturally in order to deal with the China challenge. And so the first chairman of the board of trustees of this Fulbright University of Vietnam, Vietnam Fulbright University was supposed to be the Senator Bob Kerrey from Nebraska. And Senator Bob Kerrey was a Vietnam War a fighter, an elite fighter in the American Special Forces in Vietnam, who got medals for his activities, including slaughtering 21 Vietnamese peasants in a village when they were on a secret mission in Vietnam. They killed everybody in the village because they did not want the Viet Cong, the Vietnamese nationalists, to learn of their presence. So they decided to kill everybody, 21 people in this Vietnamese village while he was in the special forces in Vietnam. And so he was something of a war hero insofar as he got these medals. And then the United States decided that he should be the first president of the Vietnam Fulbright University. And, and then there was a lot of outrage and criticism of this decision. And finally, after months of criticism, and including from Vietnamese sources, he withdrew his nomination. This former senator from Nebraska withdrew his name to be the leader of the new Vietnam Fulbright University. So that's what came to mind when I read this article. But it goes on to highlight themes. This editorial goes on to highlight themes that emerge in the reading for this week, and of course, and for the rest of the semester. And of course, as you know, I posted the scans of the book yesterday on the website for Cyber Campus, and I was supposed to get that back in March, and I never got a response. So, you know, I did try to get a PDF file of it earlier on, but nobody responded to my inquiries when I sent out the emails. So, and I think I did tell you that the hard copies of all of the readings are available, DocuCopy. So I assumed everybody had a hard copy of the book, you know, a paper copy, very cheap copy, you know, very cheap photocopy of the book, inexpensive, meaning in that sense, at DocuCopy. So I'm not certain how many people are actually picking up the photocopies of the textbooks when we make them available. So if we can get PDF files and scans of them, maybe we should just do that rather than bother having them photocopied if students are just going to use the PDF file scan copies anyway. But that's another topic. So it notes here that Barack Obama, in elections in the past, he won the presidency. Well, he didn't win the presidency, but after he became president, Nebraska started to polarize. This moderate Republican state began to polarize. And it goes on to say here, to be sure, much of the hardening, it says here, to be sure, much of the hardening against the Democratic Party specifically and ideals of tolerance and diversity more generally can be attributed to an unholy stew of angry commentary on Fox News, algorithmic political siloing on Facebook, and the subsuming of Nebraska's independent newspapers and television stations by Lee Enterprises and the Sinclair Broadcast Group. So later on towards the end of the semester, you'll have a chapter to read on the role of the media and social media and the concentration of media control in various companies and corporations, some that have a strong ideological orientation, like the Sinclair Broadcast Group controls many television stations, local television stations in the United States, and it's very right-wing, and they have editorial broadcasts in which they express their viewpoint. You're going to read about how so many newspapers in the United States have gone bankrupt, beginning 17 years ago, but then accelerating under the pandemic, and a concentration of control over the news media by more and more concentration with more and more uniformity in editorial coverage, with fewer and fewer owners of more and more of the media, also playing a role in the midst of also the downsizing in this traditional legacy media, with newspapers closing and many trained journalists who are trained in how to do good journalism, how to do critical journalism, how to check their sources and verify. Many thousands and thousands of journalists losing their jobs, journalists in the newspaper sector in particular losing their jobs, and the rise of social media with the infinite numbers of sources that people can go to on the internet to find so-called news sources that basically say what they want to hear and read, that people can find whatever they want to believe in, what they want to accept because it's emotionally satisfying, and they can find somebody on the internet who appears or pretends to be an authoritative source to confirm what they already emotionally want to believe. And this has contributed to this polarization of American public opinion as people focus more and more on those sources of so-called news that say and editorialize from a perspective that they believe in emotionally, rather than back in a time when I was a youngster, there were much fewer television independent television media. There were major television networks, only a few of them. There were many more newspapers to cover local events. But now even the local newspapers are being taken over by big corporations. So they're still local, but they're controlled by national companies and corporations that have certain efforts to generate efficiency and homogenize news reporting and make it less focused on the actual current details of the current affairs and characteristics of the local community that the local newspaper or radio or television station is covering. It goes on here to how some of the bias against the rural sections of the population, noting here that but Jane Klebe, chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party, also attributes the extreme partisan vitriol to the Democratic National Committee's decision to shift its focus, its resources away from rural red states like Nebraska, which was in part because Mr. Obama had slashed the committee's resources. Obama hated the Democratic National Committee, Ms. Klebe told me, because he feels like they stabbed him in the back by supporting Hillary Clinton over his upstart campaign in 2008 presidential primary. Distrustful of the Democratic machine and the party brand, Mr. Obama turned fundraising efforts away from the DNC and focused on building progressive organizations like Organizing for America, she said, but that created two problems. So, and so it goes on here how now, without a Democratic Party counterbalance in Nebraska and other states that are becoming red versus other states that are becoming blue, right? That typically the primary elections are the ones that really determine who's going to be the next governor or senator or representative in Congress. And of course, as we said, like for example, in this Ohio primary election that just happened last week, 20%, only 20% of eligible voters voted in that primary election, somewhere around 20%. And so who tends to vote in those primary elections? People that are intensely interested in politics. And there is a correlation between people who are intensely interested in politics and their militancy, their ideological commitment. The more ideologically rigid individuals, they tend to be more vigilant about politics and they're going to be more likely to participate in these primaries. So these primaries tend to be dominated by ideologically rigid people. So without a Democratic counterbalance, Republican primaries now determine most state races in Nebraska, so candidates are pulled further and further to the right in order to appease and appeal to an increasingly radical and angry base. In this year's governor's race, for example, Mr. Herbster's top competitor, Jim Pillen, would seem to check all the appropriate boxes for a Republican nominee in Nebraska. He's endorsed by the current governor, Pete Ricketts. He's one of the biggest hog producers in the country because Nebraska is an agricultural state, right? He even played football for the Nebraska Cornhuskers during the glory years under Tom Osborne when Nebraska used to win national championships, who later represented Nebraska's 3rd congressional district. So people love Tom Osborne so much in Nebraska that they actually elected the former football coach, Tom Osborne, to be the representative in Congress of Nebraska's 3rd congressional district. But it looks like Herbster's going to beat him. But as Mr. Herbster's, remember, this man has been charged with by multiple people with sexual harassment and sexual assault. But as Mr. Herbster's polls numbers have surged, Mr. Pillen has veered to the right, attacking liberal professor groups, though he, Mr. Pillen, is a member and former chair of the University of Nebraska's Board of Regents, and running TV ads with an endorsement from the comedian Larry the Cable Guy, a right-wing person. Mr. Pillen, you know, a professor, last week he posted on Twitter that he was the only candidate to take action against critical race theory, the only candidate willing to fight the radical transgender agenda, and the only candidate willing to call abortion what it is, murder. So it goes on here, but even with the hardline rhetoric, it will be hard for Mr. Pillen to beat Mr. Herbster's direct endorsement from Mr. Trump. Thursday night, after the tables and chairs had been put away at the Starlight Event Center, the Herbster campaign hosted a call-in tele-rally with Mr. Trump, in which Mr. Trump praised the businessman as a diehard MAGA champ and guaranteed that Mr. Herbster would never bend to the rhinos, that's the Republicans in name only, like little Ben Sasse, Nebraska's junior senator, and Representative Dan Bacon, who Mr. Trump derided as another beauty. During Mr. Trump's presidency, Mr. Sasse voted with him 85% of the time. Mr. Bacon voted with him 89% of the time, but Mr. Trump has considered both to be insufficiently loyal to him personally, and their political futures may be in jeopardy as a result. If so, they will be replaced by politicians who are more brazen in their contempt for the Democratic Party and for democratic ideals. That's why the outcome of Nebraska's Republican governor's primary is almost immaterial. So, just to show you what you're reading about in today's reading, this week's reading in the book. But before I forget, let's go do the smart attendance. And your attendance number is 767. So let me. 767 is the attendance number. Okay, so there you go. And so you can do that now. And so back to the notes. And let me go back to the chapters 1 and 2 here. So we're reading about return to normalcy. And so we go here, and we go here, and we go here. And okay, so we go to chapter 2, and noting the wildness of the American presidential primary process. So we began to cover this earlier, how Biden and Trump did well. And we got to this discussion about how the presidential campaign actually begins long before the primaries, months before the primaries, when these candidates or people that want to run for president have to demonstrate to the established authorities that they are viable candidates before the actual voting in primaries happens. And of course, this happens long before the start of the year in which the election will occur. So the invisible primary will probably start early next year after the new Congress comes into office, after the elections coming in November. The new Congress will come into office in January. And then in that year, in 2023, we're going to see who's going to announce their candidacy for president. As I said, Joe Biden has stated that he thinks he's going to run for re-election. So if he does, I doubt if anybody serious is going to seriously challenge him. The question is Donald Trump going to declare that he's going to run for president? If he is anybody in the Republican Party going to challenge him? And right now, I find it hard to believe that somebody will challenge him, given how much Trump is dominating the Republican Party. So the invisible primary might not be as important this next presidential election as it was before, simply because Biden is the incumbent. Biden has said he wants to run again, and Trump, if he declares he's going to run again, nobody's going to challenge him. Seriously. So, but we had an important invisible primary in the 2020 election because somebody was going to try to challenge Trump. And of course, with this, this belief that might or might not be self-serving, that they have to challenge Trump because Trump is a danger to the well-being of the United States and to the whole world, that he's very dangerous candidate. So of course, lots of people decided that they needed to run and they should be the one to try to take down Donald Trump. As I said, it could be very self-serving. Supposedly when it was known that Joe Biden was thinking about running for re-election, I'm not running for re-election, but running for president, that Barack Obama contacted him and said, you know, Joe, do you really want to do this? You know, you're because everybody knew he was quite old, and he would be 78 if he won the presidency. And Barack Obama supposedly appealed to Joe Biden that, look, you know, Joe Biden didn't need to do this if he was concerned about the well-being of the United States, that he didn't need to try to defeat Trump, that the Democratic Party would somehow find somebody who would be able to challenge and beat Trump and remove Trump from office. And Biden chose not to listen to Barack Obama. And then the pandemic began. And that sort of changed everything. You know, Joe Biden, as they said, he was Barack Obama's vice president from 2008 until 2016. He decided not to run for president in 2016 for a number of different reasons, including the fact that his son, Beau Biden, died of brain cancer, I think in 2015. His son died at age 40 from cancer of the brain. He was, I think, an attorney general of Delaware, Joe Biden's state where Joe Biden lives. And then he served in the U.S. Army in Iraq, I think as part of the National Guard. He was deployed there, and he came back and started his political career and became Attorney General of Delaware, and then was diagnosed, won the election for Attorney General of the state of Delaware, and then he was diagnosed with brain cancer and died. And Joe Biden had lost other children in the early, I think in 1971, his wife and child were killed in a car accident, and his two boys were injured, Beau Biden and Hunter Biden. As I mentioned, Beau Biden became Attorney General in Delaware and then died of brain cancer. And his other son, Hunter Biden, is a recovering alcoholic and drug abuser who was a focus of the first impeachment when Donald Trump pressured Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, the new president of Ukraine, to declare the opening of an investigation against Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's connections, alleged connections with his father, Joe Biden, to gain corrupt business benefits in the corrupt business environment in Ukraine, where Hunter Biden was active. So Joe Biden decided not to run for election. Also, Barack Obama was supporting Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama supported his Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton, who had also been a senator from New York State, and it was then a senator from New York State. She had previously been his Secretary of State, and Barack Obama favored her. And so Joe Biden didn't run, and of course we know what happened, that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, and of course, we can ask, what if? Would Joe Biden have won if he had run against Donald Trump in 2016? I can't say. I don't know. But he of course, was able to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. despite the fact that, as we said, that Joe Biden was a moderate, centrist candidate who did not inspire tremendous energy among and excitement among the left-wing activists that tend to be the core of the energized base of the Democratic Party, the volunteers, the people that are engaged in politics. They tend to be people that are not so much professional politicians when they're young, but people that really believe that they want to carry out some kind of substantive social change. They preferred Bernie Sanders, but he was also quite old. And of course, there were lots of other candidates running, including, we already mentioned, Pete Buttigieg, who in his late 30s, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, and she is, moderate. He came across as moderate. She came across as moderate. She's still in the Senate. I'm sure she's hoping about running for president again at some point. Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation in the Biden administration. Michael Bloomberg, who declared that he was going to run for president on the Democratic ticket, despite the fact that he had been the Republican mayor of New York City, and of course he had lots of money, and his concern was that basically that Donald Trump be defeated, and he wasn't certain that anybody could beat Donald Trump in the Democratic Party. So he had lots of money, and he spent hundreds of millions of dollars on his own money, and he did not enter until November 2019, when Biden appeared vulnerable. But of course, he had his own self-serving justifications that he may have really believed that he had to run because nobody else was going to beat Trump, and if Trump is reelected, the belief was that it would have been cataclysmic for America's position in the world. Senator Elizabeth Warren, she's still in the Senate. She was more ideologically oriented than Sanders. She was a longtime consumer advocate. Again, all trying to build upon the legacy of Hillary Clinton, and also that she was from the Midwest, originally from Oklahoma, I believe, and then she became a college professor at Harvard, and that's why she's the senator from Massachusetts today. And she was smart, and she was arguably the best debater in the primary season, and there were others running as well. 4 senators, we already mentioned Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Kamala Harris of California. I don't know, she might be quite aged. I don't know if she really thinks that she might run again for president, but I'm certain that these 3 individuals someday are thinking about, advancing their political careers. There were other female candidates, Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. She was a Democrat, but she came across as a populist figure, more similar to Trump in some ways. And then even some high-profile media figures like Marianne Williamson, a best-selling self-help author that was closely affiliated with Oprah Winfrey. Of course, what would make somebody believe that they have the chance of becoming president, including her? Well, of course, the success of Donald Trump in winning election in 2016 certainly inspired other people that were not professional politicians to maybe think about running for president. And racial diversity characterized the Democratic field of candidates. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey highlighted his African-American heritage. He's, of course, still in the Senate, I'm sure, thinking about his future. Julian Castro was one of the highest profile Hispanic elected officials in the United States, who had previously served as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Obama administration. Andrew Yang, an Asian American from Taiwan, family from Taiwan, was a tech entrepreneur, and he was running in the Democratic primary. Kamala Harris, of course, her father was an immigrant from Jamaica, and her mother, and it was an immigrant from India. So she's sort of like a Barack Obama figure, claiming, that portraying herself as Black and Asian American, and as well as a woman. And of course, Joe Biden would select her after he beat her in the campaign for Democratic primary, after she faded, to be his running mate, again, to try to mobilize non-white heterosexual men who tend to dominate the Republican Party to come out and vote for Joe Biden. And that meant getting some groups more excited about the election, having the first female as a vice president, having the first vice president who has African ancestry from Jamaica, and the first Asian American. And so she's all of those things put together. And then, of course, Buttigieg was the first openly gay candidate. He was smart. He was a Rhodes Scholar, an Afghanistan war veteran, so he checked off those boxes, right, that he had served in the military and in battle zones. And he was good at fundraising. He appealed to younger people, even though, of course, he'd never gone beyond being a mayor of a town in Indiana, where I think Notre Dame is located, South Bend. So it's a college town, but it's, but anyway, so the, of course, like I said, he's now Secretary of Transportation in the United States government. And then Harris surged in 2019 with a notable Democratic debate performance against Biden, criticizing Biden for his long record because Biden entered the Senate in the early 1970s, not long after desegregation of schools was underway in the United States or was still trying to be enforced. I mean, we talked about in this class how Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court ruling occurred in 1954, but that didn't mean that, you know, overnight that all the schools in the U.S. ended their separation of white and black students and integrated them. No, it took years, going well in the 1970s, to make this integration of school systems happen, and it's still not been very effective. And Biden was in the Senate with, along with some old-time senators who had supported segregation, who had been in the Senate for many, many years, since the end of the Second World War. People like Eastland of Mississippi I'm not certain if he's from Mississippi, but these senators that had opposed desegregation, and they were still in the Senate when Joe Biden began his Senate career. And he made some positive comments about these people, that he was able to work with them, that they were friendly to him, that they had bad positions in opposing desegregation, but they supported some good positions. So Biden had some kind words to say about them. And Kamala Harris jumped on Joe Biden in 2019 in one of these debates that the Democratic presidential campaign, the presidential candidates had, a number of debates attacking him for his kind statements about these segregation of senators. And it was kind of shocking, you know, Joe Biden, you know, being attacked for statements that he made, you know, over 30 years previously. And so, yeah, so I mentioned that. But her campaign faded because for a number of reasons, including she didn't seem to be able to organize her campaign very well. And I mention that because this seems to be an ongoing problem with her. Biden, you know, chose her obviously to be his running mate. And he has given her lots of responsibilities, at least formal responsibilities, over different policy areas as vice president. I mean, the vice president doesn't have a lot of official power. You know, the Constitution doesn't describe very much what the vice president is supposed to do, other than preside over the Senate. But particularly in the latter part of the 20th century, beginning with Jimmy Carter, the U.S. presidents have given the vice president more and more responsibilities, and this was particularly the case under George W. Bush. So Biden has given her lots of responsibilities, and she's maybe had too much. Maybe she has hopeless responsibilities, like she is supposed to be a leading actor on dealing with the illegal immigration issue, the migrant issue of people coming into the United States across the border from Mexico. Very difficult policy briefs that she has to be the leading figure on. But at the same time, her professional administrative office staff is not stable. People are leaving her staff right now. She seems to have some challenges in organizing her office staff in a way so that they can work cooperatively with each other. So, but you always see her standing behind Joe Biden whenever Joe Biden is making some new policy initiative. You see her standing next to him, again, appealing to the younger the younger female non-white section of American society in particular. Warren's campaign also stalled when she proposed lots of detailed policy proposals, but then didn't convincingly portray to people or convince people how she's going to pay for her expensive new proposals, for example, to provide universal medical coverage for Americans, to produce a system more like what we have here in South Korea or in France. As we already mentioned, nobody seriously challenged Donald Trump for the nomination in 2020. There were a couple of people that did challenge him because they were so alarmed by Trump that they did challenge him, but they were not really serious candidates. And so, and again, will that happen again if Trump decides to run for re-election, which he probably will?
Mhm.
Probably will. Okay, so we'll see what happens. They won't challenge him because he's just so, he's demonstrating how dominant he is in the Republican Party by his support for various Republican candidates that are now competing as we speak in these Republican primary elections going on in Ohio and Nebraska and throughout May and June of this year. Okay, so we need to go to our debate here. Again, what I want to highlight here regarding the primaries is Biden was not doing well until he came to the third event in the Democratic primary election process. Biden came in far behind in the Iowa opening event in February 2020, and then Biden also did not do so well in the Nevada event in February 2022, February 22nd of February 2020, and Biden lost to Sanders, and Biden lost to Buttigieg, and Biden came in second in Nevada, and a distant second. But what saved him was the South Carolina primary, which was on 29 February. And most of the Democrats, registered Democrats in South Carolina are blacks. You know, a third of the population in South Carolina are African American. And the House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, is the third most powerful person in the U.S. Democratic Congress. He is a black man, and he endorsed Biden. And with his endorsement, as Clyburn being the highest ranking black member of Congress, this caused Biden to just overwhelm his opposition in the South Carolina primary. And that really saved Biden's candidacy. And as I mentioned, that's certainly one of the reasons why Biden nominated Kamala Harris, chose Kamala Harris to be his vice presidential candidate, running mate, and why he has certainly going on to make sure that he tries to keep African-American voters enthused and motivated to turn out to vote in November 2022, later on this year. And so that's the primary point to highlight that comes across throughout the book, that the African-American voters played a critical role in electing Donald Trump, and then Donald Trump defeating electing Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, and then Joe Biden beat Donald Trump, obviously with the support of African Americans, but also then the pandemic swept in. And again, were it not for the pandemic, would Joe Biden have won? I can't say. But certainly Donald Trump was criticized for his weaknesses in managing the pandemic. So it goes on to highlight how the coronavirus overwhelmed the primaries. And I think at this point I need to shut down the computer and go to my laptop, and then we'll have our debate, okay?